time they had their CNA
Oh, that's okay.
go to work.
Oh, I don't have to turn it
That's
on.
like-
Yeah. No, I literally like.
That's the real thing.
You know what I mean?
If
Like, it's like, it's
text
awesome.
you,
Nope, that's-
then
that's-
I'm on
Are
the
the
They
mics
were
list.
so-
automatically
Like,
on?
And it's
Right,
great.
because didn't they change the, like, I was like frantically looking.
Why is
for
it so
something.
dark in here?
Huh?
It's like dark. Yeah. I want your video to be like not of quality. Do you have a skull shirt on?
I do. I'm leaving here, I'm going to the basketball game.
What game?
You or I.
Oh. Do you have good tickets? Do
I
you have
have
tickets?
4 tickets.
Huh? You already bought them?
No, I didn't.
Oh.
Somebody offered them to me.
Oh, okay. I'm not going and I have tickets
Thank
too.
you. Okay. Okay, so this is the 11-9 Policy Subcommittee meeting. If we could just start with roll call, go around the room and say who's here. Rob, we'll start with you.
Rob Mezzanotte, Assistant Superintendent.
Andrew Hennius, attorney for the committee.
Erin Earl, School Committee Chair.
Kenny Duba, Superintendent.
And Jennifer Lima, School Committee member. There is nobody here for citizens' comments, but I do have a citizens' comment that was submitted via email that I would like to
Is the door
read.
unlocked?
Doors.
It is, yes,
Oh, it is
everything's
open, okay.
unlocked, yep.
Yep. Just
So this is from Pam Panero, and she is unable to make the meeting today, but she wanted me to share her comments and thoughts with the group. She's writing about the subcommittee liaison policy. She wanted to request that we talk about why some subcommittees have 2 school committee members and some only have 1 on them. In her mind, the subcommittees with 2 have more weight because they go to the full council likely with 2 votes towards the recommendation versus the committees with 1 member only having 1. So she's just wondering if our committee could discuss the rationale and the reasons for 1 versus 2 school committee members on the different subcommittees to ensure it makes sense. She said she's sure that there are reasons she's not thinking of, but she wants to understand this better and whether this should or shouldn't be addressed in the policy. She's also wondering who approves the members of the subcommittees. Is it the chair of the subcommittee, the superintendent, or the school committee? She said it feels like in the past she's seen it different for different committees. Her memory could be wrong, but she feels like the DEI members went through the school council and wellness went through the chair. She said hopefully that makes sense. Thank you very much. So that was that. Has everybody had a chance to review the minutes from our last meeting, which was on October 30th?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Just for the record, the voting members are myself, Dr. Duva, Dr. Earl, and Mr. Mezzanotte. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes, please?
So moved.
Second?
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, awesome. So because this is an abbreviated meeting, we just have 3 policies on the agenda for today. 1 is an existing policy for review. The other 2 are new policies for possible review and action. I want to try and break this up. I think the advisory one is going to have the most discussion, so I'd like to save that for the end, if that's okay with everybody. And I'd like to start with hate speech.
let's start off easy.
Yeah, just let's go right into it. So have people had a chance to review the draft that was submitted for this?
Yes.
Okay. I also had Andrew go through both of these also from a legal perspective to make sure that there was no concern, like right off the bat from that area. So I guess my first question on this was, did anybody see anything, or did anybody have any questions? And then did anybody see anything on here that they felt was, or that was not in here that's missing from this policy? This was taken from an existing policy in another district in another state. There is not one currently like this in Rhode Island.
Just want to be able to read it again.
Okay.
Just a minute.
Yeah.
And for those who are watching, the purpose of this is just to create a culture of safety for students and just to delineate that hate speech, what hate speech is, and that it's not acceptable in our district.
We should add a purpose and a philosophy to this though.
Okay.
Just so that folks, I think that's really helpful for folks. I also think it would be helpful when we finish policies to add which meetings they were discussed. So like, we could say like policy like 11/9/2023, because now that we record everything, like in theory, in 5 years, somebody could go back and like follow,
yeah.
like they could obviously check the minutes too, but I think if you leave breadcrumbs, like that would be helpful
Yep.
for future committees. Because I know I would always like to know what some of the things were.
Yeah, I think the purpose and the philosophy are in here, they're just not like called out as such.
Mhm. Yeah, we just had Heather's.
Yeah.
Just a question I would have is, because this is a relevant thing, is that there is hate speech that appears in some literature that is part of a core curriculum.
Okay.
That's
Just,
a valid
there's a core English language arts curriculum that includes some, works of American literature or whatever that contains hate speech. And I just want to.
No,
put
and
that out
that's
there as
actually,
a-
there's a paragraph in here that covers that.
Okay, I'm sorry, I
Um,
must have missed
The
that.
way
All
it's
right.
written, it says, no curricular materials may be used that contain racial epithets and slurs as to, all the protected classes unless approved by both the director of curriculum and the superintendent.
Okay.
That's the way the
All right,
existing policy
thank
was
you.
written,
Okay.
I missed that too the first time I
All
read
right,
it.
yep, thank you. Okay, I just know that can be like a very.
Yes,
Yeah,
yep.
okay.
And I think my one question that I had on that one specific part was the policy that this is adopted from just says it has to be approved by the director of the curriculum and the superintendent. And then I had a question whether that was something that the school committee, because this is a school committee policy, or whether that was purely an administrative area.
Question.
So if you think about, we have a curriculum review adoption that we do at, the school administrative level. And then when curriculum is adopted by us, has it been brought forward to school committee? So in the past, when the district adopted the math program, the LA program, does that come to when you think about it, kind of the process.
Yeah, consistently.
Curriculum gets adopted by the school committee once we approve it. Like,
Right.
once we approve, saying this is what we want to bring forward, it's coming to you. I don't think you want to get into the weeds of having to read and look through every little thing. I would hope that you would trust us as what we're bringing forward is appropriate, and then you just approve the
Yep.
curriculum. So I think because the way this is being written, it would be left at the director of curriculum and superintendent. Because otherwise, if we're saying school committee, then are you then?
There's no appeal either, like if somebody like had an issue with it or something, like you would have, like you'd want that next level. So I think it stays at the director of curriculum and superintendent. Obviously, like if we were adopting something new, like, when we did Wit and Wisdom
Yeah.
for the elementary kids, like
And it
if there
comes
was something of note, like I think we would be informed as we were adopting that larger like
Basically,
body, but I
right.
do agree with Ken that we don't need to get down to the micro nitty gritty, and we can trust the educators and the superintendent and the director of
Yeah, I
curriculum to
agree, yeah.
approve like that level. One thing I did want to note, and I'm not sure if there's a easier way to do this, I get concerned in a policy like when it's multiple times when there's a list listed out. And what I mean by that in this one is in paragraph 3 and then paragraph 4 and 5 and 6, and then like after that long list on page 2.
It's all the same.
It's that same list of like people, and so I wasn't sure if that was intentional or if we could reference it once at the top as like a definition and then reference it throughout, just in case we ever change that. I wouldn't want to miss like changing it in every single spot. Does that make sense?
Are you talking about like the protected?
Yeah, like the
classes?
list.
Ethnicity.
Yeah.
Yep.
I think it would
You
be
can see it really
helpful to-
clearly when it says over 40 every time, like that
Right,
was the
right.
one you can catch it really quick on. Unless there's differentiation in those, I would just define something up at the top and then just reference that throughout to try to tighten up the document a little bit.
So like in the beginning, it says protected classes, and that's basically the current definition of what
Yeah.
our protected classes are. So like.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's exactly the same every time.
I think it is.
I cut and pasted, so I think
Yeah.
it is.
Yeah,
and it's
so I would just
possible that I
reference
missed,
to
yeah.
it as that, unless you specifically want to call something out, like for the curriculum piece or something. I just would try to tighten it a little bit.
Okay.
Excuse me.
What do people think? Is that?
You don't do that, I mean, it's
Yeah, I
it's
think
the
it's
same
better.
thing through and
Little-
through, so
little,
I don't know
cleaner.
what you want to do.
And then just formatting wise, I think we want to put it in the format that we use for other policies and just making sure that we format it.
Yes,
Yeah.
yep.
And that way we can have, purpose, philosophy, definitions, and then what the statement is. I do have a question I have two questions I have. It's just the over 40 is sticking out. Is that what it is? It's over 40 is the discrimination? Okay.
Yeah, we went through this when we revised our district documents, and
Okay.
Andrew went and confirmed like all the,
Okay.
yeah.
All right, thank you. And
Are you
then,
having a moment about yourself, Ken?
what was that?
So are you having a moment
I was
about
gonna
yourself?
say, are you?
I haven't hit 50 yet. No.
Yep.
And then my other
Welcome.
question is just around, hold on.
Sorry, I didn't mean to throw you off.
So the very last sentence, those who violate the policy shall be subject to sanctions commensurate with the offense as determined by the superintendent or their designee. See district policy CB, and I didn't have time to look up CB.
It's ACV, it's our non-discrimination,
ACV.
anti-harassment
Okay.
policy, just in case anything, that
Which
would be
would-
covered under here would also be an offense underneath that policy.
Okay. I just want to make sure, like, when we put policies in place, that we're able to, follow through with whatever we're saying it is and consequences, and making sure that this is a policy that we're able to enforce.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Use a different word, but yes. That it's an enforceable policy as well. And I think looking at the top of page 2, it says this policy shall apply to, it gives specific reasons of what that is. So for example, if it was something through an email, it's something that's happening in a classroom, it's happening on a school bus, and a program that we're sponsoring, if it's something that's being put through use of computers, it's there. So I think we're covering everything.
We had defined in a former policy that like schools, programs, activities, and properties. And I remember us like talking about like abroad and stuff. Was activities what we decided? For like that, let's just check and make sure we're being consistent on like that
That
overarching
phrase, okay.
umbrella
That was like
phrase.
2 meetings ago, actually.
Yeah, we like
Yeah.
did it recently,
Yep.
and I just want to make sure we're consistent, like when every time we write
Where we
it,
define
when
what it is.
we're trying to say we
Yeah.
mean everywhere that possibly this could be connected, etc.
Yeah, it was one of the ones that we just updated.
Yep. Jen, the one question that I had, I just want to point out, is on that page 2, where it lists the, six different items there. Number 5 said when completing reports, and maybe I'm reading it too literally, but it talks about, not using any words or language that are offensive. It's a violation of the policy. Then it says if you use those words when completing reports. And what jumps out to me on that is if I'm doing a disciplinary report on an
Very true.
incident,
Yep.
and I mean, to me, it seems like the phraseology needs to be in there so we know what the you know what I mean? So
I don't think it needs to be written out, though. I think that an abbreviation and this policy covers for that. I don't think it's appropriate for a teacher to be recording a racial slur in a report.
I think as long as we have some sort of verification of what that slur was. I worry about a situation where, Rob comes in and looks at a discipline report from a year ago, and maybe I can't figure out what it is this student did because the reference isn't clear
Right.
enough. So that would be my only concern.
Because it says, there's a paragraph that covers this, when context requires reference to racial epithets and slurs as to blah, 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 abbreviations or culturally aware substitutions may be used. Does that cover?
Yes and no.
It does, yeah, it's, I understand both sides, I do, because I think that like when you're trying to parse through a disciplinary report about a slur being used, you can usually work around it without saying it explicitly, but I also think, I don't know, there might be cases where.
What if we did something about saying something about when possible, if it does not change the understanding of the offense, use abbreviations or whatever. So for example, if somebody says the N-word and you write student said the N-word,
Yeah.
you know what is
Right.
going on
Yep.
there,
Yes.
right? You don't need to write that word
Right.
out. But there might be a different one where a student says a word that is not common knowledge, there is no common abbreviation.
Right.
They need to write it and put it in quotations or whatever.
Yeah.
So maybe we could
I
try
think
to
there's gotta
say
be some wiggle
yeah.
room. Yeah, just because I would say something like do your best to
Yeah.
avoid it at all costs.
Right.
Yeah.
And unless there's, circumstances
Unless
beyond our control.
like,
Yeah.
like you wouldn't be able to,
Yeah.
like it would impact the understanding of the report or something like that.
So like, because maybe used if, I'm trying to think, maybe used
So
when necessary to,
So, culturally aware substitutions may be used, like exceptions to this would be if it changed the understanding of the incident or something.
when necessary.
We also need to make sure that the person that is filling out the report is also, has no knowledge of what the culturally aware substitution would be, too. I
Well,
don't
that
know if
ties into
everyone would know
like
that.
professional development that we need in terms of,
But would that cover, I'm just thinking like anything and everything. Yeah, I'm not trying to defend the use of it, I'm just saying like when you're trying to write something up and you only have so much time of putting that in or to document that, if the person putting it in isn't aware of what that cultural substitution may be.
Yeah. Like a good example
And
of that might be.
I agree with
Yeah.
providing, professional development on this, but you may not know and may not cover everything because it's.
how often do you get I mean, I guess like there's a few, obviously, we just touched on one of them in the end, where there's other ones I think where people know what the word is and a way to convey what was said without using the word. So I think what we're looking for is where it might be a word that is offensive, but it's not like in the vernacular that people would automatically know. Am I correct? Is that
Absolutely.
so what we're looking for is a way for the teacher or the administrator to be able to document that without continuing to repeat the offensive word, right?
Yeah.
So,
I just added, unless the substitution or abbreviation does not provide the necessary factual context. Something, just like, I think
Yep.
roughly something like that.
does that work?
I mean, I think in most cases it can be clear. I just know some really, bad situations, I think that, an administrator coming in who might not know the situation needs to understand the gravity of what the prior thing was, and sometimes you just get that by the
And sometimes
report,
you're
what the
going back,
words are.
looking at records, seeing, okay, did this happen before? And you want to make sure that, okay, if it did, it's there and it's documented
Right.
somewhere. And if it-
Especially
Yeah, I
if
just don't want
it's
someone
two
saying, I'm
different
so nervous about this policy, I'm just gonna say, Andrew used inappropriate language, because when Ken looks at that 2 years from now,
Yeah, exactly.
what does that mean?
I
It
would
might
make
be
sure,
really
I would
critical
make
to
sure
know.
it wasn't used in appropriate language. I would make sure it used a racial slur or used an ethnic slur or
So-
used
Yeah.
like something
Even that
specific
gives
like
enough
that.
context
Because
for
that
it.
at least gives you like that.
This is
like-
the second time
Yeah.
Andrew has used a
Yeah.
Well,
racial
we're gonna
slur.
use our professional knowledge, our professional
Yep.
judgment too. We're not just gonna discipline
Right.
a staff member because they might have, we're trying to create awareness.
Right.
And this is not to
Right.
come down
Yeah.
as a disciplinary,
No, it's
consequence
not a
on
gut chew on the teachers or the administrators, but I do think as somebody who's reviewed like the disciplinary reports,
We've had
like
this conversation.
it's just a lot, and so and also like a lot for them as well, and when you're reviewing it, and so I believe in the sentiment, but I also absolutely don't want to make this a thing where two administrators are spending 30 minutes trying to
Trying to
figure
write a
out a
report,
word,
absolutely.
so I think some language about what Andrew said, and then when possible, or with good effort, things like that kind of give you that wiggle room where you're not really making it a harder challenge
Yeah.
to work through that. Jen, one question I had about this is and obviously this is the policy, right? But then, and obviously there's a piece of the implementation of the policy that would technically come after, but also is kind of connected to some of the handbook stuff and different things. And so, thoughts on that piece of it. This obviously doesn't have that. It would be a R version, the R version
Yeah.
of this. But kind of thinking about our current practices and whatnot. Did you have any thoughts on that part of it?
I did not.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
I think that would be a future
Yeah.
conversation if the school committee does adopt this. Then it would probably likely go back down to the administration to create whatever, I don't know, whatever this will be, whatever, the procedural piece
Right.
of this, because I think that this is really important, but also we need then to have some sort of guidance. Okay, so if someone does violate this, right, then what happens? And obviously it will be slightly different for students versus staff, et cetera, and so kind of just, I think outlining that will be important.
Well, I think also too, just for efficiency and also simplicity, because every time we come up with another policy, it's another set of procedures. And the more we do of that, it's gonna get really hard to enforce and manage. So I think the procedures need to be somewhat the same of others, of other policies that are
Yeah.
similar to
Yeah.
this.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, it's, all right, how do we do this, where's
Right.
that? And it's good to have stuff written down so we know how to handle each situation, but I wanna be careful of how many different policies we end up approving, and then how many have procedural regulations that are procedures and not policy, to make sure they all can be followed as well.
Yeah, yeah, I would imagine it would follow a very similar disciplinary path for other things,
Mhm.
but it's still, but like there might be some things, for example, that this one would need to involve the North Kingstown Police, right? Depending, in things like that, so just kind of, I think, culling out some of those pieces. It reminds me of the weapons, when we take the weapons
Yes.
from the humans,
Yep.
one. So I do
Yep.
agree with you that it should echo it, but I do think like it either should reference something else or has a
Has a
something
component
simple
to
that
it,
goes
yeah.
along with it. Yeah, because you don't want it to be complicated, but there might be some additional nuances because of broken laws in this one that we need to address.
Okay. So what I heard was format it for, look like our other policies, purpose, philosophy, define protected classes. Confirm that the school definitions are similar to the one that we just did in terms of like what constitutes a school activity. And then assuming this gets approved at some point, how to actually implement it from the administrative side of things. Did I miss anything?
But that would be separate from the policy.
From the policy, correct.
And I'm actually looking into those too, Ken. With that, you know how like they come and they're like the R's?
Mhm.
I've been reading through some school committee books regarding those. Huh?
It was like, oh, I need to read that, but.
Yeah. And about how to handle like those documents and who needs to approve them and whatnot. So I'm doing some research on that. That's applicable with this policy, so as well.
Is there any reason not to move this forward to the school committee with those changes that we just discussed?
This will
Do
get.
we want to
Is-
review it here first, just because it's a new policy?
So we will see it twice at the school committee because it is a new policy,
Okay.
and so you could send up the first draft, get some feedback from the school committee, it'd come back to us, and then we could work on it, and then it could go back up. So that would be my recommendation, just so that we don't see it twice here, and then maybe they have a vastly different take on it, and then we add another meeting. So I would recommend maybe sending a draft up, and then it can come back down to us at the next one.
That's fine.
All right.
If needed, right?
Yeah.
And we said that this, we'd adopted a little bit of this from other.
Oh, it's
policies in other
completely,
states.
like, it is the policy, I just added, I added
It's in
our
those folders
protected
too.
classes.
Right.
Yeah. Where was your thought process going with that, Rob?
No, it's okay, never mind, it's good.
You sure?
Yeah, I'm good, yep.
Also, like, when it goes, like, either at the school committee or when it comes, if we likely will have a meeting in between, like, it will probably, like, coincide. If any, folks on your staff, administration, anyone has, like, any additional thoughts or, like, things that maybe we forgot or anything like that, like, we definitely will take feedback, because we,
Yeah, the one thing I want to do, I was
Yeah.
thinking this, going through other policies, and I mentioned this earlier in the year, and I don't think we've really gotten to doing that, is sending out the policies while they're in draft
Mhm.
to our school community, so that way we can get some feedback from them. I always did that in Jamestown, and especially when educators were looking at it, it was just another eye, and they were like, oh, how's this going to be implemented because of X, Y, and Z, whatever that may be. And it always gave our policy committee a little thought to go back and look at something that was specific that someone else saw, and thinking, okay, if I'm the person and I'm implementing this, like, what does that mean? And I think that sometimes gives good feedback as well. And I just think we should be doing it with all of our policies, is we know we have these meetings, it's on the agenda, but not everyone looks at it.
Right.
But if we send something out specifically,
My only comment on that would be, I don't want to have, and not just this one, anyone, like, so we meet, and then we feel as a committee that it's ready to move forward. It sits at the school committee level, like Erin said, for 2 meetings, and the agendas are posted with a policy on there. So I would prefer if there was a way to direct people to that versus having it have to go out, come back, and then go back out. I feel like that's a.
So we would always, I'm just saying, like, how we would do it, we would say, this is the policy we're working on, here's, it's gonna be at the school committee, bring that to us, and at the school committee, if anything came up, I would always bring that forward.
Yeah, like
and
if
we'd
you
have
wanna do that on your
And we'd have
own,
that conversation,
I think that's great.
at the school
Yeah.
committee meeting, and it wasn't often, but sometimes someone raised a really good
Yeah.
question.
Yeah, no, I
About
think,
how are you going to implement,
Yeah.
a certain policy, or did you consider X because
And
of something else?
so if there's a way that you can, once, like, let's say we're gonna send this out and we say, okay, today's the 9th, we're leaving here, this is gonna go on the agenda for the next, school committee meeting, that process happens on its own. If you want to, on your own administratively, in between that, send that out.
And
I
that's
think-
what I'm saying, like, that's what we do, we would.
Yeah, that's
we would
great.
Yeah, I think that's
Submit
awesome.
it, right, and, it's going out and saying, if there's any feedback, it just kind of draws the attention to it as well.
But
so
I just
that
want to
way
be
people
clear,
don't
it's not
look
gonna
at it.
hold it up going on the agenda.
No.
Yeah.
Whatever feedback we get
Yeah.
gets discussed at the school
meeting.
committee.
Okay, all right,
So-
so you're gonna take care of that.
Yeah, we'll do it, that's what I'm saying, I'll take,
Yeah,
we'll do
okay.
that at
Yeah.
my.
Also,
at
I
my
would
end,
love
and
at some
just sharing
point,
that out so
yeah, at some
people-
point too, I think like, we can get a little, I'm hoping like once we get our feet under us, we can do things like draft policies can be on websites, we can
Yeah.
link to them and post them on social media and get, like there's different things I think we can do.
Yeah.
So I totally agree, that that's important. Jen, I just asked Andrew to look up, if there's any Rhode Island, like laws that we should be referencing in here about hate speech or something, like,
Okay.
like I feel like, we do that with other
I don't think
policies,
they have it, I'll double
so-
check, I'll check though.
Yeah, just
Tomorrow.
wanted to check to see
Yeah.
if there's any Rhode Island,
I don't
whatever.
know this, but-
Yeah, that's interesting on its own, but,
Yeah.
but maybe there's something that we
Right.
might wanna reference, so.
So, are we okay with moving this forward to the school committee with these changes?
Can I ask one question?
Yeah.
It's kind of gnawing at me a little bit. Symbol of hate.
Yes,
I understand there are some very clear
yep,
violations, and they're mentioned here. I guess I just have like, I don't know, like maybe I'm overthinking this, but like, could there be, given some of the complexities that are existing today, could certain symbols be perceived as hate, but could be like, I guess maybe I'm overthinking it. Is it possible
So-
that we could?
the way that it's defined in here is it
Yep.
calls out the 3 that are the major ones that everybody recognizes. And then it also says symbols whose display is reasonably likely to cause a substantial interruption, reasonably likely to interfere with the rights of a student, is reasonably likely to cause a hostile educational environment.
Yeah.
So if it's not those, then it's not.
Okay.
That's the way I read it.
Okay. I understand.
I hear what you're saying.
You know what I mean? I'm
but-
just saying people from different experiences and backgrounds perhaps could be interfered with based on things that, you know what I mean, might not, I don't know. I don't know if I'm making myself.
Give a specific example.
Conflicts going on in the world.
Yep.
You're talking about like an
Symbol.
Israel or a Palestine
Yep.
flag, something like that. I that's not, to me, that's not hate speech, and that's not the way
Yeah.
this reads
I agree.
either.
Yeah, but let's
I agree.
work it through though. So say a student has a sticker on their computer, right?
Yep.
And somebody reports it under this policy. So then whoever's reviewing that at that level would look at A, B, and C, which we should probably like
Roll it out,
format,
yep.
yeah. And so they'd say, is it reasonably, did this person like put it on with, like likely to cause substantial disruption, like with interference with school activities? Probably like a sticker on a laptop, like, like that would be no. Reasonably likely.
And who's making that decision that, I'm just really thinking this through,
Yep.
the implementation of this.
Yep.
So who's making the decision, and on what basis that the symbol is creating a hostile educational environment?
The same people that make all the decisions,
Yeah.
so the building administrator,
Right.
You all,
And I guess
and
I'm
then the
looking like
school
how,
committee.
and what are we using as the criteria that it's creating hostile, like, I think we wanna
I'm
make sure.
I'm just saying, and
Because like, you wanna make sure everyone's looking at this
The same way, right?
systematically and like,
Yep.
and making that decision that, okay, yes, the showing of whatever it may be, the symbol, is creating that hostile environment. I think we all know what a hostile learning
Yep.
environment is, but going and saying, okay, yes, that is. Like, what are we going to say we're looking for
I guess my
that
question,
is then saying it's
That's
a
kind
hostile
of, that's kind of what I was
learning
worried about.
so if you have a case of sexual harassment, it's the same type of thing. It's creating a substantially disruptive environment. It's impacting the education. There is no hard and fast criteria for that either. So in my mind, it's the same type of, it's not just feeling
My computer's gonna get flat.
bothered by it or.
I don't know, because sexual harassment, I feel like is a little more explicit when it's done.
Oh, that's not true.
No?
No,
Okay.
Like a swastika is a swastika.
I'm not saying that.
Yeah.
I'm not
So I
talking
think
about
back to
that.
the
Yeah.
original example of the flag.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Palestinian flag.
Yeah.
I mean.
I think that's educator judgment.
Yeah, you see what's going on
Yeah.
now. I mean, they can come down on two different sides on that. To me, when I look at that from a legal perspective, it's, you want to see, are we actually having disruption to the educational environment, or is it a perceived disruption?
Yep.
And that's, I think,
and
a
what
careful
is the
part of the analysis.
disruption that's creating that hostile learning environment? I just wanted, I guess to go back to making sure that,
So-
what we're putting out there.
right,
Is something that we're able to enforce.
I mean, I think you
Right.
already are enforcing some of these,
Yes.
right? And so this is just put, like,
Putting
And again,
like-
I'm not trying to, I'm not talking about like
Yep.
the symbol you just, like, that's clearly.
right.
That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking, what I'm saying is that there's context with regard to politics, there's context with regard to global conflicts
Can
that
someone
can be,
take-
that are very complex and very differently interpreted depending on people's worldview and beliefs and background and all those things.
Can someone take a political sign and say that political sign is a symbol of hate based on person, right? That politician that might be running for office. And that's a symbol of hate. And now is that up to us to make that judgment call when it's not a known symbol of hate? I think that's where I'm kind of like.
Yeah, that's
down
exactly
that
what I'm
path.
saying.
So there is
Yeah.
a symbol of hate,
Yeah,
like
so the
reference to reference, like,
anti-defamation league has one.
yeah, there is an actual symbol of hate. The other thing is, let's play devil's
Yeah,
advocate.
this
Let's
to it.
pull this out, okay?
What's that?
And
I'm not
no,
saying that.
and
Yeah.
but I'm saying, like, let's pull it out, and then I'm a student, and I come in, and I have a swastika,
Mhm.
and you tell me it's hate speech, and I say, I'm not speaking.
Yeah, again, I'm not.
No, but
I'm not
that's
at
kind
all-
of where
I'm not at all
the-
pushing
yeah.
that at all.
Yeah,
I'm-
yeah.
I'm-
You know, so that's why it has to be spelled out. But there is a database of hate symbols that, can be linked to. And like if it's in here, then it is, and if it's not, I mean, I don't know, this is probably more of a legal area, but I think it's important to spell out that hate is not just speech.
I do think, I understand what Rob's saying though about that it's very broad, like
Yes,
that beginning
oh,
part
yeah.
of it is very broad, and that when it says but not limited to, and it says a couple, that's very clear, but then
Yeah.
that gray area is a little bit tricky, and so, I don't know if I just Googled this just to see what I could find quickly, and when you Google, I Googled, which I joked to Andrew that my computer's definitely gonna get flagged, but I Googled something about how do you determine whatever, and the first thing that pops up is that anti-defamation leagues, whatever, but I don't know enough about that organization to judge if that's a good resource that educators,
We want to make sure that the resources
Yeah.
that we're using.
aren't politically
And
tied,
again,
blah, blah, blah,
I'm-
yeah.
I'm just trying to say
Yeah.
this from this is kind of how I always try to think and plan for a worst case scenario, because
Yeah.
we don't want to see anybody going to school feeling discomfort, obviously. We don't want that.
Yeah.
We don't want them having to, I just want to make sure that we have something we're working off of when it comes to making decisions about what is within that threshold of appropriateness versus what isn't.
Yeah.
So this is actually the reference that the other thing that I saw linked to is this ADL document. So if you want to
Yeah,
add
Like, any
you know,
precedent, like in schools.
a
about
reference to
students.
this?
You know what, I feel like there's gotta be
I
some
think that's
information
something we
on it.
put in
Not the second
procedurals.
one.
Yeah.
Like our procedural
Yep.
procedures that we would come up
Yeah.
with
Do,
as resources that can be, used
uh-huh,
in making any type of determination.
Yep.
Yeah,
okay.
So that might be
Do we
the
wanna
hard
review
part.
that first? Like, I'm just not, I don't know, I'm not familiar with.
Right, well, we would wanna vet it.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
You know, as you know, like the meeting I just came from, it's a governor's commission on genocide and Holocaust.
Mhm.
And we had similar conversations at that meeting and about getting resources out there for educators.
Yeah.
But we wanna make sure they're vetted resources that people have that
Yeah.
to use. Same thing here, we wanna make sure these are vetted resources that we're going to say we're using as our reference.
Right.
Right.
but that's not gonna be in this policy.
No, that to me,
Yeah.
that's procedural.
Yeah, because
And
you
those are
can't start working on that
references.
until this exists,
Right,
so
those
my
are
recommendation,
references that
yeah.
we're putting
Yeah.
together for, the administrators to be able to reference.
Yes, so my recommendation would be to move it up. I do think though, when Jen or I introduce it, I'll bring up that question about like the language of this and see if the committee has any suggestions or like things that we want to look at or whatever. Then it will come back to us here at our next policy meeting. We can take that consideration, we can also get more feedback, and then
Yeah.
we'll send it back to the school committee. So my recommendation would be to at least set it up, like
Just
so.
to clear that, it won't come back here unless we send it back here as a school committee. Once it goes
If they,
to,
yeah, if we have if they just look at it and say, oh, we don't have any suggestions.
but even if they do, we
Yeah.
can edit those at the school committee level. It does not have
Yeah.
to come back to
Yeah.
the policy.
But it could.
It could.
It could,
but it's not
it doesn't,
necessary.
it doesn't
Yeah.
have to, like
Right.
process-wise, you don't, once you're sending it to the school committee, it's for the reads, right? So the purpose of the
Yeah.
first read is to see, is there any
Yeah.
comments or
Right.
feedback? Whatever is shared at
Yeah.
that point, we can edit, and then it goes up for
Yeah.
a second read.
Right.
It
Yeah,
doesn't
like
have to
changing
be-
a word doesn't have to come back, but if the school committee says, oh, we don't like this whole section.
Right,
it's
then it
gotta
has
go
to
out.
go back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, I think the implementation is really important. I think maybe working through that part is a little bit important. I asked Andrew to look into maybe some like, what is
Is
it
there any
called?
pending litigation out there that's on this issue?
Yeah, or any litigation that's happened kind of with, like around this, just because it might have some comments about what that threshold is that you're talking about and things. I'm thinking about, I don't think I was on the school committee yet, but I remember sitting in it about something about a hat and what was on a hat and whether or not, like that sort of thing, and
It happens
so.
sometimes.
Yeah, there's
Yeah.
been Supreme Court cases
Yeah.
even that have
Yeah.
gone about like
Yeah.
speech in schools and things like that, and that's, those
We
are
have to
all.
look at how it
Yeah.
protected, like, freedom of speech as
Yeah.
well. and-
It typically
So-
will come down to the actual disruption, that's usually
Yeah.
how
Right.
those boil
Right.
down.
Right.
And you
So in
Okay.
the interest of time, are we all right with moving this forward, or do we want to hold it?
No, I think we can.
I'm okay with it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can you make a
I-
motion?
All right, I'm going to make a motion to move this forward with the changes and the notations that we discussed, so that the draft that we present will incorporate what we discussed here, which I went over already, and also adding to include any references and incorporations to any pending litigation.
No, we wouldn't reference pending
No,
litigation.
no, but if there was something that Andrew found and then he was like, oh, you got to change this word because of that, like, we would incorporate
Got
that
it.
change when we send it up to the committee. Okay, that's my motion. Can I get a second?
Second?
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Okay, so, in the interest of time,
This is, not this, but one of the resources Jen put in had some procedural stuff in it, like contact the custodian as quickly as possible and things, so that's in the folder, something about communication too, so this reference from Portland will be helpful for that next step.
so I would like to review the advisory committee one next, only because we have some pending stuff that's waiting for us to make a decision on this policy. Did everyone get a chance to read the red line version?
Yes. It was, can I put it, comment out there, or?
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
So under subcommittee membership D,
Yep,
I'd like to recommend that it's 2 years, or at least 2 years, that someone is sitting on a committee for.
Wait,
Yep.
where is, oh, red line, never mind, thank you.
okay, so we want to say with the exception of representation, advisory committee members will serve, and is that to, because this is going to apply to everything.
What part are you talking about?
Under, so section 1, letter D, about how long a member sits on the committee, I think it should be a minimum of 2 years. I mean, we can say 3 years, but people may move, leave, I
Yep.
think 2 years, that way you're on for a year, and then you can carry over the work for the second year. And maybe also too, just make sure, we don't want all members leaving at the same time. And it might be a little tricky at first, but I think we want to make sure we stagger the time frame that members are exiting the committee.
So maybe, and my only other thing is, like, so whatever we put in this policy has to apply to all the subcommittees.
Yes.
So, is there a reason why any of those cannot hold a two-year term per person?
Because those two were dictated by the state.
State
I just asked Andrew to pull up the building and the wellness one, because those
Yeah,
those
that's-
have rules that go along with them, and so I just want to see if either of them have anything to have time in, because I don't disagree, but if it is, like, say building's only allowed to be on 2 years, we need to know,
Right.
with the exception of the building committee due to the state, whatever.
Don't think there's a restriction.
I don't think there is either. I know there's very distinct guidelines about who should be on them from those
Health and
those
wellness
ones.
is more, yeah, this one's in
Building
the
is pretty
building.
specific too.
Yeah,
It like
it's
talks
who's
about
on it, I don't think
Yeah.
it gets into any.
Yeah.
I
so
think
just
it's-
check.
I think it only
Yeah.
has suggestions of who, I don't think it has anything but how.
Yeah, I don't
long.
remember, but I just know that those exist because we have to have them, and so I want to make sure that we don't accidentally.
And
do
I
anything
know
weird.
one of the things that we had talked about at the DEI level when we talked about term limits and membership was that making sure that we didn't bar somebody from being able to continue to serve if there was nobody else available and, they were willing to continue.
Jen, any thoughts to where we are right now in the timeframe with this policy? So, like, I know we're working on this macro because when I came in, I was pretty surprised at the limited explanation of things like this, and we obviously had to create the policy one to have this committee, which I also want us to consider with this, because I don't know if that should be a completely, like, it's a standalone policy right now, but at some point, I think our goal was to align it, like have it in this one maybe, or something. I don't know if it needs to stay by itself. Not how a policy gets done, but the people on the
people on
committee,
it,
yeah.
yeah.
So we should, if we
Yeah.
could look at that. But, so, for example, like in section 1, it says, every August or upon creation of new committee. I don't know if we want to put in some language, or when we adopt it, like, at the school committee level, like, maybe we say something about, like, for this cycle, since we are beyond August,
Yep.
like, it will be, like, the motion could be, we will adopt this policy, and, like, the procedures that were supposed to happen in August will happen in
Will happen
December.
now, okay,
I think we just need
Yep.
to do something like that if our intent is to do it this cycle, which I believe it is.
Yeah. So to address the citizen's comment about membership, the way that it is currently is up to 2 members. We don't force a school committee member to serve on a committee, which is why not all of them have 2. So I don't know
Wait, what?
whether we, how to address that some have 1 and some have 2.
So building has 2,
Mhm.
this one has 2,
Yep.
DEI has 2, wellness only has 1, and
CLEC.
CLEC's different.
Right.
CLEC's like a liaison, because
Yeah.
they are not technically
They're not-
a
the
school committee.
wellness only has 1.
Yeah, so why does wellness only have 1 is the question.
In the wellness here, the school.
Oh, and
committee has to chair.
negotiations too, that's
Yeah.
technically a
Wellness might be,
subcommittee.
on.
Negotiations, we had 2.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, wellness, the school committee member is the chair, which was.
It may just be
That's
that
why-
that's all that's
Interesting.
required in the statute.
When we got here,
Double
but
check.
we fixed that. Say it again?
It might be that's all that's required in the statute.
Yeah.
I'll double check right now.
I personally feel like when possible,
I
having
think it's only
2.
1. I know our wellness only had 1 school
I
committee
think
member.
that's,
Yeah.
yeah, it says they
And
serve
she
as the
was
chair
the
as well. Yep.
Chair of the
I
committee.
think that's
Yeah.
the requirement.
That was my experience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think if you say up to 2, and that way if there is a
Yeah.
committee that only has to have 1,
Yeah.
And that's the reason why there may only be one.
Yeah, there's something very specific too about, so the way that our process goes, every 2 years, we do this, like, when elections happen, basically, like, we do this, like, the first night you get sworn in, and then there's this, like, it's very actually wild. You've been at the school committee for 30 seconds, and people are, like, nominating you for committees, and it's scary. Or maybe that was just me. And so, with wellness, that one, like, I think when, like, you look at, like, it's somewhere, like, we definitely only asked for one. Like, we didn't ask for two, and so if it's, like, something where it's like, oh, it can be two, but, like, wellness has to be one, right? But, like, in all the other ones, like, DEI has to be two, because that's the way we wrote it, or whatever. But I think, the other thing that we have to remember is, like, our school committee is only 5 people. Mm-hmm. So, like, as we get more temporary committees, as we do different things, when we were in negotiations, and different things like that, like, it's a lot of additional work and a lot of additional meetings. And so, like, 2 is ideal, I think, because I just think it helps balance voice if somebody can't be there, et cetera. And also, I think Pam's point is valid about, you know, that when you only have one, it's only one person that kind of has a lot of background, where you might have 2 who might have 2 different perspectives. I don't think it's a guaranteed 2 votes, per se. I think a school committee member could be on a committee. The subcommittee could vote one way, it could go up, and the school committee member could vote differently up there. It's happened. And so I don't think it's necessarily that vote power piece, but I do think 2 is better in life. And so I'm fine writing it that way, but we should also make sure that it aligns with that one part about,
It should be fine with health and wellness too. I'm
Yeah.
looking at it here, it just says the subcommittee will be chaired by a member of the school committee.
yeah, but then it talks about who has to be on it.
Oh, yeah, at least one parent, administrator, student, community, health-based, but it doesn't
It
preclude you
doesn't
from
say
having
you
2 school
can't
committees.
have,
There used to be 2 on wellness. Lisa
Wait,
and I have
subcommittee?
both been on it,
Yeah.
so it must have just been
That's the
something
way I crossed that out,
this time.
but it
yeah.
doesn't say it can only be one. It just says that it apparently has to at least be one.
it has to be
chair.
one, they have to be the chair,
Yeah.
but you could have more.
That's the way
Yeah,
I read
it
it.
looks like a lot of at least, yeah.
There
Okay.
were 2 before.
Yeah, you both were on.
Yeah.
Alright. Yeah, so I think that's fine. And then we could either if this passes, we could nominate someone to join that one, like in addition to
Yeah.
Tom, or we could wait until the shuffle.
Do you want to say something in here? When possible, there will be 2 school committee member representatives on all advisory committees. And that way it's in there, because right now it just says up to 2 members, and then, you know, just adding a line that, you know, when possible. Because there are only 5 of you, and there are a number of committees, and we may not get 2 members on every one.
Yep.
At least that way there's an understanding that we want to, but we may not always have to.
So maybe no more than 2 members instead of up to?
You could do like no more than. Well, you can't have more than 2 right now because of
Yep.
Oh, right.
School
Yeah.
court. Like there's no,
Yeah.
yeah. So I think it's either like you're both saying the same thing. It's just how you word it.
I would leave it up to 2 members.
Okay, so we're gonna leave that the way that it is?
Yeah, my suggestion was just adding another line, just saying that, you know, when possible, we will have,
Okay, so it says, so I added a line that said all school committee members must serve on at least one advisory committee, because there wasn't anything in there that
Yeah.
said that before. And then you wanna say something like when possible?
when possible,
Each subcommittee.
subcommittee will be represented by 2 school committee members.
Represented,
Not represented, but
okay. Will
we'll have.
Include.
Yeah, we'll include.
There you go.
2 school committee members, okay.
Is there a different part of this that talks about the other piece that Ms. Panera brought up about who approves the members of the subcommittees?
Yes, so down at the bottom,
Sorry, I'm mixing what the DEI subcommittee recommended versus what's actually in this document versus what was in the old one, so my brain is trying to calibrate some of those.
yeah, so in here, it says, where is it? I know it's in here.
It's B and C, I think, on page 1.
Section A talks about the application rubric. B says representation shall be determined by the school
Need to
committee.
check this against the charter.
Well, see, that was a question I had as far
I
as
was
all
pretty
members.
sure it was in here. Hold on.
Is that like ministerial, or do you actually, is it prospective members?
Like,
I mean, that
I'm
will-
sorry, you just used a lawyer word that I did not learn in not lawyer school. What does that mean?
All members of each subcommittee will be approved by the
Yeah.
school committee, so.
You
if
were
we-
saying, does that word mean go backwards?
Yeah, oh, no, is that like, okay, Andrew, someone's recommending Andrew as a
That's a
member
good
of the
word.
policy subcommittee, does the school committee vote him up or down, or is that, look at, here, Andrew is now a member of the school committee, I said, I think it was ministerial, just, okay, you're now a member of this subcommittee. Do you know what I mean?
No.
I'm assuming the school committee wants the final say on which, or who are actual members of the subcommittees, correct?
Yeah, well, like, I always use DEI because we specifically created that one and we created a policy from scratch around that one. And that one required that the school committee approve the members.
Okay, yep.
They weren't the ones who picked the members, but they had to come to the school committee.
So what was there, I guess I'm trying to
chairs.
envision a situation, let's say that through that process, Andrew Hennius, we're presenting Andrew
Yeah.
Hennius to the school committee, does the school committee have the ability to say no?
Yes, I believe, that. I mean, that's kind of the way the
That's your
town-
opinion, right?
Yeah,
Your
that's-
opinion
yeah,
would
my
be that,
opinion.
yes.
That's what I would change, that's what I was getting at, will
Yeah.
be approved, I would almost say like prospective
Oh.
members of each subcommittee
Considered.
shall be presented and
So
considered,
it's
something just to
basically
make it
saying,
clear
like,
that,
it's basically saying, yeah,
yeah,
it's not just
It's not a rubber
procedural.
stamp, yeah.
Yeah.
or ministerial.
That's not, I don't even think that's what the word means, I looked it up. We're gonna work on this one, it's something, you can send the definition to me later, because I'm now,
Instead of saying all
Not
members,
accepting of
prospective
it.
members. of the
Prospective members, okay.
Subcommittee will be approved by the school committee.
Or shall be voted on by the school
Yeah.
committee.
Shall be voted on.
what do you, Robin, Ken, what are your thoughts on that piece? What's kind of what's your experiences in the past? Do you think that, I think that's appropriate because they're school committee, subcommittees, like, and but I do think that, like, they should be presented by the chairs, like, I think I do think that, kind of how, I'm thinking of like a very similar, like, parallel path to kind of how we approve contracts, right? Like, I think the people that are doing the work and that are putting together their committees are one thing, and then they come to the school committee for that, like, hey, these are who we wanted to pick, this is why.
Yeah.
And I think it gives the school committee an opportunity to say, hey, like, it's really great, but like, we noticed that, like, you don't have, you only have one parent on there, have you considered or tried to recruit somebody from the high school and the middle school level, because whatever your committee looking at has a lot there,
I can
like.
just speak of,
Yeah.
my past experience, and if we had a committee where we had to bring people forward for approval,
Yeah,
they never denied anyone being on it, they just made sure that we had a diverse
Yeah.
membership
Mhm.
and everyone was being
Yeah.
represented. And as long as I was able to prove that these are the best people that, that we believe can be on it, and we are representing, a diverse population in all areas, meaning, you're looking at if it involves student representation, staff
Yeah.
representation, community, parents, like, and then, the school committee would approve.
Because I
Based
think,
on that, they never went into like who the person was and like not wanting a specific person on it. I think we gotta be careful at that.
the town approves, for town boards and committees, they actually are like
Interview.
approving, yeah.
And sometimes aren't they
I
interviewed?
don't
or-
think it's
I know where, I
typically
know
interviewed, yeah.
previous towns,
It depends.
they were
Yeah,
interviewed.
I mean, maybe they would, but like basically when they have an opening for, I'm gonna say the water board, right?
Mhm.
They have 4 resumes that are attached to the agenda, they look at them, they discuss, and one makes a nomination, and so I kind of see the membership list as like the same thing, like it comes forward, the school committee looks at it, goes yay, nay, and
Mhm.
that's that. But the work of putting it together, it happens outside of the school committee.
I asked Andrew I feel like we need to confer, we should just double check with the town charter, because I know in this policy draft, we're talking about being residents of North Kingstown, which makes sense, but also that's actually not like one for the town subcommittees and committees a lot, like residency isn't in there, so I just want to make sure that there's not like a
Okay.
rule about that in the town charter. I sent that to Andrew.
Okay.
Not that I have any authority to do that as not the chair of this committee, but I just want to make sure we're not accidentally I think it's fine and it should be that or connected to NKSD,
Well, that's why I put, like, not just residents,
Yeah.
parents of NKSD students, that way if you have a parent of a CTE
Yeah.
kid from Warwick, they can still be on the subcommittee even though they don't live in North Kingstown.
Yes, and that's interesting. And also, like, residents of North Kingstown, like, they don't have to be a parent, like, if they have a specialty in a
Right.
certain area or whatnot, but live in town and would like to contribute like that as well, right?
Right,
Like,
yeah.
so those two things cover those two areas, yeah.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, that's helpful. I would add guardians to that as well, though.
Yep.
So the subcommittees we're talking about DEI,
Yep,
wellness,
yep. Building
This one,
this one, and building.
and negotiations.
and negotiations.
Oh,
And the new
negotiations.
temporary one.
The new temporary.
Well,
Yep. The
But
what's it?
negotiations is different, because that's just the representation of the school committee sitting on it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Negotiations doesn't,
So I'm
wouldn't
not
get
sure,
people.
I don't think negotiations.
No, it wouldn't have,
Not,
the only reason Jen and I are including it in our brains is like at that meeting of chaos, at the first school committee meeting of every other year, like that's one that we had to like vote on. And so we were like, who are the two school committee members that are gonna be on the negotiation team for the NEA NK negotiations? Okay, Aaron and Tom, it's you. And so it's not that, it wouldn't fall under that whole process, but it still falls under that,
Right. Because like the way
the
I
school
s-
committee
yeah.
delineation of like when we're each getting assigned to things,
Correct.
like that counts if we're in a negotiation year.
Yeah,
So
'cause
we
like
should
this
just
is
probably
like
put
the
some
blanket
different language.
policy, and then under it,
Yeah.
each individual
Yeah.
subcommittee has its own nuances, like wellness must be this, building must be,
Yep.
negotiations only need school committee members. So
Yep.
the process for each subcommittee is different. Like, but the overall overarching thing
Yep.
kind of covers all of them.
And did we say that each subcommittee is gonna have a specific length of term for people on it?
We're saying 2 years,
Okay.
that's kind of,
It's usually 2 or 3, Ken.
I said 2.
Okay.
I think 2, because that way, you know, you're in for the first
Yeah.
year, you're learning, and the second year, you're there, but I also think there needs to be some type of staggering of members.
Yep.
You don't wanna
It's
put.
just not everybody coming
You know,
on.
when you start a committee and you get everyone on it, now 2 years, everyone
Right.
leaves. And the history of the work that you're
Mhm.
doing is not there. And I think that's why, you know, that first year of putting it in place, you might have to figure out, okay, well, who's gonna stay on a little, you know, another year longer, so you have that carryover? And then you can start staggering it, because then you can say, okay, well, now my term's over. And then you need a member to replace Ken. And then, you know.
yeah, that's what we're
following
trying
year,
to
you
do in
replace Rob.
DEI. Like, we went
Right.
through, we mapped out like what positions are staying, what positions are going.
And that first year,
yeah.
people, you just have to work with the group, and
Yep.
people have to understand, someone's gonna stand a little bit longer, just so you can get that staggering going.
Yep.
Um,
Yeah, so I think Jen, just write that down, something about like, you know, if in the case of, you know, that all the
And it
members
might-
had,
It might be
yeah.
drawing names out of a hat in order to do
Yeah.
that, right? You just,
Yeah.
okay, these members are on for,
Longer.
you know, 3 years right now, and these, well,
I just think we gotta be careful, like, if we mandate anything like that, because you cannot force somebody to stay on a committee.
No, it would be the opposite. Say you had like 2 spots and you had 4 people that wanted to stay on, but like they were all up. You'd say, okay, to make sure that we have staggered representation, we're gonna keep 2 of you and bring in 2 new voices.
Yeah.
It would be to remove, not to make people do it,
Okay.
in my opinion.
right, and
Yeah.
and people may volunteer, yeah, I
Yep.
don't wanna stay on for
Yeah.
an additional year to
Yeah.
help stagger it,
Yeah.
but I do, and
Yeah, it would be if you had too many of those people. Of course, you
Yeah.
can never,
Yeah.
you know, I could quit any
I
day.
mean, so let's, I think we should look at that language also.
Just saying, I like to
Uh,
remind people of that. It's something important. The other piece too of this is, I think that will often happen with the new committees, right? Like that's why we're having that challenge with DEI right now is like, it's when you create a new committee, then like there's that. So maybe there's some language in here that we could write about like, you know, after the 2 years after the adoption of a new committee, you know, this is how the chair handles that. Like, you know, because that's when it's really gonna happen. It'd
So
be
do
very
we-
unlikely to happen like often otherwise, but
So do
so.
we say with D that, it's a 2-year term up to 4 years? Because this way, you have that flexibility of after the 2 years, if you need to keep someone on longer to help stagger, they
I
can
would-
stay on for an additional year.
I would say 1 year, so I would do like a 2-year term,
With a 1-year extension.
with a 1-year extension, yeah, because that
Because
way.
you also don't want people on for year after year after year, right?
Yeah.
You want to be able to bring in new people.
Yeah.
Depends on the committee a little bit, right? Because like, I know with building committee, for example, some people you do want on think for a long
think-
period.
yeah,
They have
that
like an
one-
expertise area, like that's.
Or a subcommittee that
Yeah.
you don't get membership for, you don't wanna start putting people out just because they've turned
Yeah,
out,
you
if you
just-
don't have
I-
any other
I think that's
volunteers.
from my,
I
the
saw that we had
last
some,
organization I was in.
I know
Yeah,
in building committees I've been on,
memberships.
there's been people with like
Yeah.
a construction background who are very valuable to have
Yeah.
on the committee for the duration, you know?
Yeah. I think,
Just for example, yeah.
Yeah, so maybe we consider, I think with committees, especially volunteer committees, having the goal is to be able to roll committees, bring in different voices, make sure you don't burn your volunteers out, et cetera. But also, like, there can be job-specific ones that, like, make a lot of sense to be on there. So, like, I'm thinking of the building subcommittee. And I don't know his official title off the top of my head, but Adam White is on the building subcommittee. He has a very specific job in the town that it's very helpful that
And
he's
there's
on that
also,
one. You know, like,
that's a committee where
Yeah.
there's certain people that are required.
yeah.
Right, so.
But,
so
like,
that's-
architect is required, but, like, there could be other architects
there
in
could be
towns that wanna
right.
do it.
I'm just saying,
Yeah.
like, that's where we
Yeah.
gotta be careful that there are other
Yeah.
state requirements that we have to follow.
Yeah.
I just, time-wise, it's 6:30,
Yeah.
Rob and I have to.
Yep.
Yeah, we
have
Yep.
to-
Yep, so this one's,
Yeah. it's
Not
fine.
going anywhere.
Okay. So I just want to remind everybody that I've got people on the DEI subcommittee who are like hanging on
Yeah.
only because they believe in the work. Like the more we delay this policy, the harder it's going to be.
I can talk to you too, Jen, about like what to do with the current policies that we have in place to, like, we can talk, about like how to handle that for
Okay.
your committee without this. And then we can
Okay.
also keep working on this, but also know we want to try to get
Okay.
something in place.
Yeah,
So-
'cause as it stands right now, I don't have an avenue to open up membership. That's the problem.
Yep.
Are there people who are dropping out of the committee?
There are people who would like to because
Okay.
we're hitting about 2.5
So-
years at this point.
So do we want to, like we did with the previous, I think we do the same thing that we did with the previous one, because the whole purpose of us meeting tonight was to work on this and to get this on the school committee agenda, right? And it is on the agenda. I think we
Put forward the draft.
make the changes we
Mhm.
talked about
Yeah.
and put the draft there and see if there's any other feedback we get.
That would be
Because
my
otherwise, now we're
preference, yeah.
waiting until.
We're waiting,
And the whole
yeah.
reason of getting this meeting tonight was so we could work.
Yeah,
on
so you can make a
Yeah.
motion for that and then,
I'll
like,
make a, do
oh, go ahead.
you want me to? or do you-
I was just gonna add one more discussion piece, sorry. This one, because it's an existing committee, technically doesn't need 2 reads, but that doesn't mean that the school committee, if they don't, like, if they get it and they would like us to look at a different angle, or they feel like there's more details or whatever, they could send it back. But it's not it's not a 2-read one.
We've done 2 reads on all revisions.
It's not required.
It doesn't say, and I think that's why we've erred
Really?
on the side of, right, that's one of the things that we
I
do.
do
I
think
think
it
we've
says
been
one
doing
read.
2 reads
We've been
on
2
all.
reads on
We
all.
have been doing 2 reads on all, yep.
Yeah,
I think we did one read on revisions.
yeah, we need to
Yeah, it's
change.
one, the
All
policy says
districts.
1 read on revisions.
We did,
Yes.
we did.
I'm
we did
100% on that.
Okay, show me that, because
I
Andrew
will.
and I both
Flash
looked.
it.
I sent you ministerial, so
Yeah.
right back at you.
Oh, I'm excited for that.
Okay, so, well, we can haggle.
So
that.
make a motion, Ken,
Yeah, okay.
were you gonna make a motion?
I'll make a motion to put the advisory committee and liaison policy on the next school committee meeting, November 6th.
Okay, I'll second that.
16th. Meeting next week.
Next week, yes. Okay, that's the 6:30 button. Can I get a vote on that, please?
I,
Did you have a second?
Aye.
Wait, I made a
I
motion, you seconded it. Okay,
Okay, all right. Okay. Make a motion to, let me just double check the next meeting date, because we're all scheduled. I lost my calendar.
And then the last one was I know we're not gonna get to it, but I wasn't sure if we wanted to like ask the administration to specifically like talk to anyone between now and the next meeting for the.
Yep, that
other
would be
one.
great.
Is there anyone specific or?
Whoever, I mean, maybe
I would say, can we put this
Jody?
on the admin council meeting?
Which one, cultural
The cultural
coordination? Yep.
Yeah, I would love some feedback from the educators, like
Sure.
just kind of on their thoughts
We
on
have
that.
a,
Yeah.
come in a few weeks.
Are we good for the 27th for the next meeting? That's when it's currently scheduled.
Should be.
At 5 o'clock?
Yep,
Yes.
okay, all right, I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Okay, thank you very much, everybody. I know this
Thank
was
you.
tight
All in favor?
timing, it
Nope,
makes
it's
for a
good.
long day.